One of the most well-defined WWE feuds in recent memory is the one between Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar. The two of them have been battling one another since 2015, and as two of the biggest stars in the industry, their matches are typically reserved for pay-per-view main events, often in a stadium setting. WWE have pushed it as one of the greatest conflicts in their history, but just how good has it been from an in-ring perspective? Let's take a look at 7 blockbuster matches across 7 years, we are only counting singles matches between them, not multi-mans, and find out. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and this is every Brock Lesnar vs Roman Reigns WWE match ranked from worst to best. Join us. Number 7, WrestleMania 34. Sadly for Roman at the time, Operation Get the Big Dog Over as the company's top babyface was a complete and utter failure, with fans vehemently resisting the idea, leading to the main event of WrestleMania 34, where they completely turned on his and Brock Lesnar's Universal title main event. Simply put, Roman's booking had been woeful going into the showcase of the Immortals, with WWE forcing the issue and doubling down on him being the guy, even though the audience clearly wasn't embracing it. Brock, for his part, had been in the possession of the title since WrestleMania 33, and the part-timer hadn't exactly set the world on fire with some of his performances as champ, with Lazy Brock coming out from time to time. Lesnar and Reigns tried to do some stuff and put on a show for the masses assembled inside the New Orleans Superdome and everyone watching around the world, but the crowd just weren't into it and mainly amused themselves whenever they weren't catcalling the performers in the ring. The big spot in the middle, with Roman kicking out of 3 F5s in succession, was designed to make him look like the ultimate gutsy babyface, but only made fans turn on him more. Reigns kicking out of an F5 through the announce table, followed by another one in the ring, further led to chants of "This is awful." From there, it was an uphill battle that they just couldn't win, even after Roman had made a comeback and allowed himself to get busted open hard way before Lesnar retained with a 6th F5. The Beast Incarnate was so incensed when he got through the curtain backstage that he famously threw the Universal Championship belt at Vince McMahon and stormed away. Hard to blame him. Number 6, SummerSlam 2018. WWE had probably hoped that the fans would be more on Roman's side by the time he met Brock once more in the main event of SummerSlam 2018. They weren't. Before he and Lesnar could throw down in the Barclays Center, however, Money in the Bank briefcase holder Braun Strowman came out to wish both men luck and let them know that he would be waiting for them at the end of the night. To cash in, that is, not like in some sexy underwear in their hotel room or something, which I'm sure is what you're all thinking, perverts. And then the match began in earnest, with a good old-fashioned bit of finisher spamming as the big dog threw a couple of Superman punches and a couple of spears before Brock caught him in a guillotine choke on the 3rd. Then it was Roman's turn to go to Suplex City, which must have been by far his least favorite tourist destination in the world by this point, as the Brooklyn crowd began to shower him and Lesnar with chants of "You both suck." Yes, it was months later, but fans still weren't buying what WWE, Brock, and Reigns were selling. In a cool spot, Roman attempted another spear, only for Lesnar to sidestep him and turn it into a suicide dive on the monster among men at ringside. Brock followed that up by hitting Braun with an F5 on the floor and then smacked him with the briefcase and a steel chair because why the hell not? Well, here's why the hell not, because that distraction was enough to allow Reigns to hit another spear and bag the Universal title to a typically polarizing response. Number 5, Greatest Royal Rumble. WWE's first event as part of their deal with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was 2018's Greatest Royal Rumble, a WrestleMania-sized super show headlined by the first ever 50-man Rumble. While the Rumble itself went on last, the show was littered with other major league bouts, including Brock Lesnar defending his Universal title against Roman Reigns inside a steel cage. Coming less than 3 weeks after the WrestleMania 34 mess, it's fair to say that the world wasn't craving another encounter between these two men so soon, but the crowd in Jeddah seemed to enjoy what they saw. Their match was more of the same move spam, but, in a cage, so that's cool, I suppose. After the German suplexes, F5s and Superman punches, Roman tried to escape, only to get a vicious elbow in the face, then Brock tried the same, only to be powerbombed down. The F5 and spear kickouts were already played out by this point, though the big dog did look like he was having an absolute blast battering Brock with a chair chair before spearing him through the side of the cage to the floor in a striking finish. Unluckily for Reigns though, the Beast hit first and thus retained his title. Better luck next time, Samoan Lex Luger. Number 4, Crown Jewel 2021. The next time Reigns and Lesnar met in Saudi Arabia, Roman had transformed into the villainous, all-powerful tribal chief and was enjoying the run of his life as Universal Champion, with Lesnar's former advocate Paul Heyman at his side. Meanwhile, the next big thing had emerged from pandemic-induced hibernation and was now babyface Cowboy Brock, creating a new dynamic and adding an intriguing layer to their rivalry. As well as the change in alignment, what made this match refreshing was that they didn't just go right to smashing the finisher button from the get-go and try to build to something a little more slowly. Well, slowly for these two anyway. Reigns was more aggressive here and held his own a lot better than in their previous meetings too, showing how far he'd come since Lesnar routinely steamrolled him a few years earlier. Roman hit a spectacular dive over the top rope before attempting to wrap things up with a spear to no avail. Brock got to show his own athleticism with a massive leapfrog, but an F5 didn't get the job done. Charles Robinson took a bump off a second F5, which was cue for shenanigans, and Heyman throwing the Universal title belt between them before the rest of the bloodline helped to make the difference. A solid ending to what had been a really good show and an interesting chapter in the resurgent rivalry to boot. Number 3, WrestleMania 38, Night 2. After the events of Crown Jewel, the unfortunate cancellation of their match at Day 1, and then Brock's rampage at Elimination Chamber, Lesnar and Reigns became only the third match to take place 3 times at WrestleMania, and the first trilogy to actually headline. Closing out Day 2 of the granddaddy of them all, there were plenty of expectations on the pair heading into their title unification match, especially as it was billed as the biggest WrestleMania match of all time. But was it as stupendous as promised? Well, actually, it was suitably epic, and by this point, Brock and Roman were very well acquainted with one another and had developed a winning chemistry. Much better than their effort 4 years prior, this was a worthy way to close out Mania festivities, even if it didn't feature anything especially earth-shattering, though it was literally barrier-breaking, I suppose. The crowd were 100% with them this time too, cheering Jolly Lesnar on as he threw suplex after suplex with glee. There were more spear kickouts, F5 kickouts, a ref bump, and a good story told as the head of the table got more and more desperate, resorting to underhanded tactics before unifying the titles with a final spear. Number 2, WrestleMania 31. The first ever meeting between Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns was also one of their best. Second best, just in case you weren't paying attention. Closing out WrestleMania 31, the big dog was attempting to dethrone the WWE Champion, who had been on the warpath since ending The Undertaker's WrestleMania winning streak a year before. To show just how far Roman had come since then, at WrestleMania 30, he was tagging with The Shield in a quick 6-man against Kane and the New Age Outlaws of all people. It was now crystal clear that WWE saw Reigns as the man to lead them into the future, but his road to the top had been turbulent as fans still favoured others, particularly Daniel Bryan, ahead of him, and were rejecting the mammoth push that he was receiving. On the night though, Roman shrugged off the boos and held his head high as he took a serious beating from the Beast Incarnate. Put simply, Brock manhandled him out there in the way that only Brock can. Any attempt at a comeback shut down almost immediately by our Viking Space Lord. Lesnar got busted after colliding with the ring post, but right as Roman was starting to rally, Brock cut him off with an F5. And that was the cue for Seth Rollins to sprint down the long ramp to the ring and cash in his Money in the Bank briefcase, turning the bout into a triple threat. The Architect then survived a scare and curb stomped his fellow former Hound of Justice to bag his first WWE title. The cash-in is obviously incredibly memorable, but let it not be forgotten that Lesnar and Reigns were having a banger before it all went down and Seth stole the show. Seriously, don't forget about that, lest Brock Lesnar find out about it, put you in the front loader of his tractor, and drop you from the sky. Speaking of, number 1, SummerSlam 2022. Yes, it is the match that will forever be known as the one where Brock Lesnar drove a tractor to the ring and then jumped off the tractor onto Roman and then put Roman into the tractor's front loader and dropped him into the ring and then used the tractor to lift the ring off the ground and send Roman tumbling outside the ring. Really, the tractor was the star of the match, but I suppose Brock, as its operator, did his part as well. In all seriousness, this last man standing battling match for the WWE Undisputed Universal Heavyweight title was absolutely tremendous fun and much different from any other match between Lesnar and Reigns. Without many, if any, restrictions and able to use whatever they wanted as a weapon, the two warriors excelled, and aside from the farmyard equipment fun, used the steel stairs, broke tables, and even used the remnants of a table in their attempts to generate a 10 count. If there is one criticism that can be leveled at the match, it's that everything after the tractor destruction was a tad anticlimactic, but to give credit where it's due, Brock and Roman had the stadium crowd on their feet the entire time, and Lesnar looked like the world's best babyface as he refused to stay down and kept getting to his feet while battling the odds. Oh, and F5ing Paul Heyman through the announce table. That certainly helps. In the end, it took Reigns, the Usos, a failed Theory cash-in, and Brock literally being buried under a pile of heavy debris for the champ to retain. After this spectacle, it feels like if WWE are going to book yet another match between these two, it needs to be a tractor fight on the roof of Cobo Hall.